Hi kids, this is a video that explains how you can work ahead at your own pace in your workbook, and this is something that I will be suggesting for a few kids. And if this is something that you are wanting to try, you should first have a conversation with me about that and just make sure that I know that you are going to be trying to work ahead, and I can talk with you about it first. Um, okay, to show you how you can work ahead at your own pace, I do want you to take a note page for this so that you can look back and kind of see the directions on how you can work ahead at your own pace. The first thing that I wanted to show you is talk about the structure of an entire lesson and what the lesson pages look like. And I'm sure that you've seen a lot of these pages, but I just wanted to walk you through that. And I'm going to use as my example lesson, I'm going to look at Chapter 3, Lesson 1. Okay, so the first page in your workbook for this lesson looks like this. Okay, Lesson 1, Chapter 3, it's called Add and Subtract Decimals. So the very first page of a lesson, which we usually don't do this page, it usually has something called a real world link and just a little activity to get you ready for the topic of that lesson. That's a page that if you are working ahead on your own, I would want you to look through that page and follow what it says, do the activity on that page. After the real world link page comes 2 pages of examples. Okay, examples, and you can see how they're numbered. Examples 1, 2 on this side, and then more examples on the next page. You can see example 3, 4, and 5. And sometimes these examples actually go for more than 2 pages. On this one, there is another example on the next page right here. Okay, example 6. So there's usually 2 pages of examples and sometimes part of the next page as well. So a lesson starts with the real world link, and then there's 2 pages of examples, sometimes a little bit more than 2 pages. In fact, let me add that on here. So this is usually page 1, or 1 page of the lesson, and this is usually 2 pages. And sometimes it goes on to the next page. And then you have the guided practice, which are the problems that are usually assigned for a lesson. If I look at Chapter 3, Lesson 1, guided practice, those problems start right here. And the next page is called the independent practice. So those pages you've seen from the very beginning. You are usually assigned the guided practice and the independent practice. So that is basically the structure of a lesson that we have used. And so that's the background for what lessons look like. This part is going to walk you through what you should do if you are going to work ahead. So the first thing that you're going to do is you still have to take notes. Okay, you are still taking notes on a Cornell note page or in a comp book. It's up to you. And the notes come from the examples pages. In fact, when I am making my lessons, I am basically taking examples from the example pages. And what you would do is write down an example problem and then explain how to solve it over here. So if I go back to my examples pages for this lesson, I would be writing down an example right here, an example problem, and then explaining how to solve it over here on the notes part. So I'm gonna do an example, not all of the examples, but some of them are similar to each other. You can kind of see that as you're looking at the examples. but you want at least one example from each kind of problem. So the problem would go here, and then I would explain how to solve it there. If I'm looking at this lesson, my problem would be find the sum of 23.1 and 5.8. That's what I would write here. And then I would show how to do that over here. Lining up decimal points, highlighting. That's the explain part. Okay, so you still have to take notes even if you are working ahead. And this is the notes come from the example pages. Next, you still have to do the work and the practice problems, and that looks like what you're familiar with. Your work and practice should be the guided practice problems and the independent practice problems. And this part is super important. You should be focusing on how am I showing work for the problems I'm solving. As a reminder, especially if you're working ahead, you need to know if you're on track, getting feedback. Am I doing these right or not? Remember that you can check the odd number problems in the back of your workbook for the guided practice questions. Or I'm sorry, I said that wrong. For the independent practice questions, you can check in the back of your book. If you go into the back of your book, it's the green section, the green tab pages in the back. It's called, in fact, selected answers. Here in the back of your book, the green tab on the side, that gives you the answers to the odd problems for your independent practice problems. So as you're working ahead on your own, you're taking your own notes, explaining, writing down problems, explaining how to solve them in your notes, following the example pages. Then you're working on the practice problems, guided practice and independent practice. You can be checking the odds in the back of your workbook for the independent practice. You can also, during class, be checking the teacher guide. That is this book. Okay, the book that's up front, it's got the wire-bound edge right here, and you can go to any page in this book, and it's going to have the answers for all the questions. Okay, this book doesn't, the teacher guide just shows answers, though it doesn't show work. So if you have questions about the work, you definitely have to ask. Or if you want me to review something, ask me about it. Or if you want me to look at your work and you're wondering, hey, is this a way that I could show work? Ask me about it. Okay? So if you are one of those kids that is going to be off and running on your own, you still have to take notes, you still have to do the practice problems showing your work, and you still got to be checking yourself as you go. Am I on track? Am I doing these correctly? Asking me questions when you run into them. Finally, the last thing that I want to highlight is this. So when you get to the end of a chapter, you've gone through all the lessons, taken notes, and you think that you're ready for the chapter test. The last thing you're going to do is bring me your notes for the chapter. I want to see what notes you've taken, and I want to look at your workbook. Okay? So after you've got notes for every lesson in that chapter, and you've worked on the practice problems, the guided practice and the independent practice, and you've shown your work for those problems in your book, bring me your notes for that chapter. Bring me your workbook. I want to look that over with you and just check it out, see what you've done. If I see good notes and I see good work in your workbook, I will give you the chapter test for that chapter, and you're taking that test. Of course, you can still make fixes to that, but this whole process is how you can work ahead at your own pace. Again, this is not for every student, definitely only for a small number of students in each class. I'm going to be suggesting this for some of you, and if you think you're ready to do this, to be off and running on your own, you need to be really self-directed, you need to be real responsible, you need to follow this process, taking notes, doing the practice problems, checking as you go, interacting with me, asking questions, and again, at the end of the chapter, when you think you're ready, I want to see your notes, I want to see your workbook, and then I will give you the chapter test. So, again, this lesson is how to work at your own pace. If you're interested, please talk to me and we'll discuss it together.